All right, Gordon Rytmeister. Mate, thank you so much for taking some time today to chat. Welcome to the Drummer's Perspective podcast. I got to say straight up that you are, without a doubt, probably one of my biggest inspirations in terms of Australian musicians, not just your playing, but just your career as well, and versatility and longevity within the industry. It's something that I really admire a lot, and you're a huge inspiration to me. And you're one of the first guys that I wrote down on my list of people that I wanted to chat to when I started this whole project. So yeah, I'm super stoked that we managed to find a time with your super busy schedule. So thank you again.
Well, thanks for having me, mate. It's my pleasure, and take it easy on all that praise, mate. Just a hack from Sydney, mate.
No,
hacking his way through.
No, but not at all. You've really been someone I've looked up to a lot over the years. So it's great to do this. We've had a lot of conversations and catch ups over the years when you've been in town about various elements of the industry and playing and all that kind of stuff. And I really feel like we could go in such a multitude of directions with this with this chat today. There's a lot I would love to pick your brains about, but I think mainly to start with, something that I kind of associate with you, and I think a lot of other musicians that I've spoken to about you is just like how versatile you are, and how you can be like such a chameleon within different styles and genres and environments, even big kind of arena stuff or small jazz club things. You kind of just you can sound very authentic in all of those different environments and situations. So I'm curious to start with kind of that and like being a versatile player. Is that something that you like set out to be from the beginning of your journey as a drummer, or is it just something that kind of happened like organically and through a need to work kind of thing?
Yeah, thank you for a start. It's very sweet. Look, I look, I suppose I started out playing music that I was listening to as a kid. I was into rock and pop music of the day, but it was through the drums that I learned about different styles and discovered different sorts of music, and realized, that it just naturally led me there. There wasn't sort of a master plan about it initially, anyway. The drums introduced me to jazz music, and whilst jazz wasn't a sound that naturally appealed to me, I understood from learning this and that about the drums and the history of the drums, reading Modern Drummer magazine, that this is where the drums came from, and therefore it was an important thing to understand and be able to do. And then ultimately that developed developed into a real genuine love for jazz music and improvised music, and styles other than those which I grew up listening to, like as I say, pop and rock music.
Mm-hmm.
What I will say, as far as the authenticity of playing different styles goes, it's all relative. You can play. I could play what is perhaps accepted here as really great jazz music, or great Brazilian feels, or great Afro-Cuban feels. But if you were to go if you were to go to the places where that music is really played, there's going to be differences. And because I'm a white boy who grew up in Sydney listening to Led Zeppelin, so it's not going to be
Sure.
Brazil '66, or
Yeah, sure.
as much as I try, but that doesn't stop me trying. And what I would say, about anything though, and this is, I genuinely believe that what trumps authenticity is is good feeling, a groove, you know.
Mm.
So if you can play solid, steady time with clarity and give people in an ensemble something to play with that they feel comfortable with, that beats the nuance of being authentic any day of the
Mm.
week. Uh, I often cite an example of that, but it names names of of people. But let's just say, like I used to do a big band, like a Frank Sinatra kind of show, like a thing with a full big band with Tom
Mm-hmm.
Burlance, and we used to do that. Um, and on occasion when I couldn't do it, at various times they got different drummers to fill in, and one was for instance a more it came from more of a jazz, authentic, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
jazz kind of position,
Mm.
but probably erring more on the small group side of jazz. And well, the other was Kerry Buchanan,
Mm.
who's a great
Mm-hmm.
great drummer who wouldn't regard himself in any way as a jazz a
Mm-hmm.
jazz musician. He,
Mm.
in fact, his dad was a fine jazz solo, like jazz alto player and saxophone player, fantastic jazzer. But Kerry really didn't care for that music.
Mm-hmm.
However, when it came to as far as the other guys in the band were concerned, they preferred to play that music with Kerry, even though it wasn't played authentically. Um, like even though it wasn't, he didn't have the sort
Mm.
of subtlety or the, say, the nuances of a jazz drummer. But what he
Mm.
did do was lay down beautiful, clear time, and it swung, because
Mm.
he knew how to do that. But
Mm-hmm.
it mightn't have been the sort of touch of it's like, I mean, to simplify it, like, in that sort of music, you want to do your best Irv Kotler impression,
Mm-hmm.
but he wasn't sort of, he didn't have that kind of nuance. However, he laid it down. He gave the
Mm.
band what they needed in terms of setups and played
Mm-hmm.
time where, time was needed and swung. So that was actually preferential over a sort of more nuanced, authentic, kind of sounding thing that didn't feel as solid and uh, authoritative,
Yeah, sure. Wow, how interesting. I mean, that makes total sense, of course. I mean, it just, you know, if you dilute all of that, it comes back to that point of like the drums just being, the timekeeper for the
Yeah,
band, and anything that kind of goes on top of that is great. Obviously, you want to, get the parts right and patterns accurate, but yeah, if the time's not there, then it kind of puts the other things into a little bit of insignificance, really, in the band context like that, like when
absolutely. And
it determines. Yeah.
so I suppose, my um, yeah, like after having sort of stumbled upon that notion,
Mm.
like my sort of modus operandi, if you like, would be to, if I'm playing a style with which I'm less familiar,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start from a simple place and play, what I think is the essential ingredient of that music. And look, and when it comes to grooving, it's about creating a pulse. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you can find the pulse and sort of place it in a place, I mean, like I'm going to make generalizations here, but generally, jazz music is often felt more on top, more
Mm-hmm.
pushed than
Mm-hmm.
say rock and pop and backbeat music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, and that's not to say it speeds up, but there's a sort of urgency about it. There's a kind
Mm-hmm.
of forward motion in it that differs from rock. So you want to sort of those are the sort of nuances that uh, I'm first going to try to address rather than the
Mm-hmm.
sort of vocabulary nuances. Although, you want that as well. You don't want to be playing, you don't want to be playing a swing feel with a, a 24-inch kick drum,
Of course, yeah.
like, building it like, you know, who's
Yeah.
like Chad Smith or something,
Yeah, sure,
like,
sure.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It's, you've got to have the sort of dynamic sensibilities of the music, but first and foremost is the time has to be rock solid and steady and
Yeah.
sort of moving in the way that the time does within that style.
Mm,
But then you can address the nuances like the internal dynamics and then the vocabulary, as well. Like
mm,
the touch and the vocabulary and all of that. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, sure. Yeah, great. That's super valuable information, I think, to share because yeah, it really it just highlights, I guess, someone with your experience and playing in those multitude of situations and getting that feedback from the other musicians you're playing with, of them directly saying, we'd rather have someone who's just gonna keep solid time than any other, chops. And that's kind of an age-old story with drummers overplaying in general. Like, the other musicians don't want to hear the chops as much as they just want to hear like the groove. So
Mm.
yeah,
Look,
that's
you
yeah.
can there's a great in the 10th anniversary of Modern Drummer,
Mm,
um, which I can't believe is, that was 1987, I think, or
mm,
87. And they did a sort of recap of various superstars of the time,
mm,
um, interviews, and one of whom was, of course, Steve Gadd.
mm,
And Steve Gadd says in his interview, um, a good backbeat um, surpasses a whole lot of bullshit. And so for me, like the groove trumps everything.
mm,
And it trumps authenticity, it
mm,
trumps chops, it trumps
mm,
whatever. So
mm,
like if you can play good feeling even time,
mm,
you're more than halfway there.
mm,
Honestly, like it doesn't need to be. I've had enough experiences of hearing people just killing me by playing simple,
mm.
simple and well.
Some time, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
great. I think that kind of leads me on to something else I wanted to
Word from
ask
my
you about.
sponsors here, mate. So it's
No, go for it. Get
Pepsi
it in.
Max.
Get it in. Yeah, I think the last time we caught up, you were in Adelaide playing a big band show for the Cabaret Festival, I think it was. And then, like the following week, you were going to play the Big Red Bash, I think,
Yeah, right.
house band, but the rock thing. So even in that little, that week that I saw you, you were going from a big band thing to a big rock thing, so someone like yourself that's jumping between those styles, on a daily basis sometimes, how do you go about like making that mental shift? At the headspace, I think what you were just referring to, where you're just, that the pulse is that the pulse and the time are paramount. So if that's the mindset, that's a great place to start. But I mean, I'm just curious about the little stylistic differences as well, where you're changing techniques and approaches and things like that.
Yeah. It's well, as you point out, like I think the main thing is um always prioritizing the groove and the feel
Mm,
and the time.
mm-hmm,
That's the first. That's the prerequisite. That's the primary requisite to
mm,
fulfilling the what it is.
mm,
But as far as, I mean, obviously, like Big Red Bash is an outdoor festival to, you know, um,
mm,
10, 15,000 people.
mm,
So, you know, in that instance, a lot of nuance and subtlety goes out the window.
mm,
Uh, and well, the other thing too about Big Red Bash, like even within that being an outdoor rock festival, um, I'm playing in a house band and we're playing with different artists, all of whom require different things. So I think last year we played with Tim Finn from Split Ends and Richard Clapton and they require different things, like within the sort of backbeat genre, if you like, or rock pop genre. Um, so there's I suppose there's stylistic different things, but I mean I grew up listening to that music, so it's not like I know. I mean I love the True Colors Split Ends True Colors record,
Mm.
and in fact there's a thing, and I brought it up with Tim that I noticed this back in the 80s, when Split Ends drummers, and like when I first heard Split Ends, it was Mal Green playing the drums, and then he left the band, and at some point Noel Crombie took over playing the drums. He was the percussionist, and he took over playing the
Mm.
drums. But I noticed whenever either of those guys would play a straight eighth rock feel, that you would, like, even at a medium tempo, not at a fast tempo, where everybody else would play eighths on the hi-hat with the right hand, assuming
Mm.
you're
Mm.
right-handed. Those guys would play broken eighths, like as
Mm.
in one and two and three
Mm-hmm.
and four and one and two and three and four. So
Mm.
the hi-hat and snare are not playing at the same time on the two and four, but
Mm.
which is what Charlie Watts does,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, just by not playing, but not playing
Mm-hmm.
in the right hand. But it's a different feel, and um, it creates a different feel, and it was just an observation that I'd made over the years, seeing them. I saw the Ends with a Bang tour at the when they split up in the 80s,
Mm.
and it was Noel Crombie playing the drums. And yeah, and anyway, I brought it up with Tim Finn, and he said, well, it probably was because the tempo was too fast. But like when they're playing, things like I See Red, you're
Mm.
you're probably a bit young. You're probably a bit young for all
I
this.
know that tune. Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
cool,
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah.
So that's pretty bright. So they play,
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Cool.
um, but they also played it on I Got You, which is,
Mm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it gives it a different swagger, a different
Mm.
swing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but yeah, Tim thought it must have come out of uh, it being too fast to play one-handed.
Sure.
But but and then carried, and then they used. I mean, he didn't have a definitive answer, but
Mm.
it was something that I'd observed, and I suppose this is just one that's come to mind, but
Mm.
that's like
Mm.
a nuanced thing that I've taken on board, noticed and taken on board, and thought, okay, that's that feel.
Mm.
Charlie Watts not playing the hi hat on two and four.
Mm-hmm.
That's a thing that he does. So, and these are very specific
Mm.
things to a particular thing. But if you're doing, anybody's music, you pick up on those sort of nuances.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think they're more, there's some of the more subtle sort of things, but
Mm.
again, none of that would make any difference if the time's floating, and the
Mm.
and the it's floating
Yeah.
around. But yeah,
Yeah, sure.
look, a good groove trumps everything.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Great.
Um. Yeah, but yeah, as far as sort of sorry, I will just say this, like as far as going from something like Lisa Simone with the big band,
Mm.
to the outdoor rock pop festival. I'm gonna adjust my touch, and power, if you like, or volume, if you
Mm.
like, depending. I mean, you're gonna adjust that from song to song, let alone
Mm.
show to show. But yeah, and I think that comes from allowing the music to dictate what it needs, not sort of coming in with a preconception. And that's something Peter Erskine was great at drilling home,
Mm.
because
Mm.
it's like I remember on his everything is timekeeping
Mm-hmm.
videos. I think I
Mm-hmm.
think it's the first thing he said. When you play a piece of music for the first time, you introduce yourself, say hi, I'm Peter, and you shake its hand, and you wait
Mm.
for it to. Uh,
Mm.
to dictate, to tell you where the conversation's going. It's, you don't come in and go, "Hi, I'm Peter. I play like this, and this is my
Mhm.
favorite thing, and check out this I've been working on." Like that's,
Mhm.
um,
Sure.
and I think that's kind of the recipe I've tried to adopt, to
Yeah.
varying
Yeah.
degrees of success.
No, absolutely, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I'm curious then. Like, I'm sure like you're at a level where it's kind of second nature now. But do you do anything to kind of prepare yourself away from the kit or even on the kit? Like, if you know that you're going to be going from like a small group quartet thing straight into like a big outdoor rock show, like, or is it just like you just go straight from one to the other, and you can adjust on the fly? Because I know like some guys I've spoken to in the past, they will just listen to a lot of the style that they're about to jump into if it's been a while since they've played it or been in that environment, or but for someone like yourself, do you do anything like that?
Um, I suppose not so much these days. I mean, if I
Mm,
like back many years ago, like I know if I was playing a gig that was a sort of um fusiony type gig, or like something that might be notey, like
mm-hmm,
might be more dense.
mm,
Yeah, I'll work on that. Like
mm-hmm,
I'll sort of warm up to to a bit of that.
mm-hmm,
Or I
mm-hmm,
would have back in the day. Not
mm,
so much these days. But
mm-hmm,
um, what I would say in terms of preparation for anything is I really try to be on top of the music in terms of the arrangements. I really try to
mm-hmm,
know what's supposed to happen.
mm-hmm,
And that's depending on the gig and how prepared the artist or let's say artist is,
mm-hmm,
and how kind of consistent the artist is, and by that I mean like whether you know um they change stuff up form wise on the day, or like
mm-hmm.
like it's not a regular thing.
Sure.
Uh Um, I was gonna. That's all right. I was gonna say something, but I won't go there.
Okay.
Um,
Suspense.
but yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I just like to, yeah, add a bit of mystique.
It's okay.
Um, uh, yeah, like so I like to be on top of the arrangements. Like and as I say, some things are less arranged than others. But
Mm,
if it's a pop thing and it's played a certain way, I know I can bring more to that music and help the ensemble. The stronger I know the song, and
mm,
the form, the more I'm confident, knowing, yeah, this is the bridge, it's not the chorus, or
mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm,
it comes down here because it's a breakdown or whatever.
mm-hmm,
I can dictate certain things on the drums that help
mm,
everybody through,
mm-hmm.
and makes the whole thing sound better and
Sure.
more confident and strong. So
Sure.
yeah, that's that would be something I do take seriously. Like
Mm,
I do really
mm,
try to be as prepared as possible. I was doing a thing with the Sydney Symphony the other day, which is always a stress,
mm,
because of the conducting,
mm,
depending on who the conductor is and how they go about it.
mm,
Uh, some are more drummer friendly than others.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, so I know whenever I'm doing a symphony thing that's always going to be an issue to some extent.
mm-hmm,
Hopefully less of an extent, but that's
mm,
always going to be an issue. So definitely in that situation, the more I know
mm,
what I'm supposed to play,
mm,
and probably more importantly, how what I'm supposed to play fits in with what the
mm,
orchestra is supposed to play. Um, because often you'll have 16 bars rest or something, for instance, and the orchestra will have some kind of phrase,
mm,
and I if I'm not great at following the conductor, um then uh I don't know what that phrase is, the phrase might start
mm.
on the end of one, or like
Sure.
and if I'm displaced and I come in the wrong place, that's
Hmm.
that's real
Yeah.
trouble. You know,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
that's a real problem. So, yeah. So the more I know about what the orchestra's doing. So in the instance of that music, we were playing the music of Hans Zimmer, the
Mm.
film composer.
Hmm.
I went they sent out the charts before, but they also sent the everything, the scores and the like the
Mm.
all the instruments. So I would go through and notate cues for myself that weren't there, like if there weren't
Mm.
if the cues weren't there, and in this instance they weren't there.
Mm.
So I'd go and notate something, that happens in the 8 bars before I'm supposed to enter, so that I
Mm.
know, so that I can, correlate what I'm seeing in terms of the conductor with what I'm hearing, and go,
Sure.
okay, that's where
That's
that's
where it
where
is.
I think I am.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
You like
Yeah,
the
great.
confidence? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's exactly where I think it should be.
That's where I think it's gonna land. Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Wow. That's great. Great, man. I guess then I mean something else that we've spoken about a number of times when you've been in town, and I'm kind of always chasing some different answers and approaches to, is what you've been talking about as a priority, and that's just solid time and consistent pulse, and yeah. So apart from playing along with records and CDs and pre-recorded music with a solid pulse, was there anything that you can remember working on, or any advice that you were perhaps given that helped you, develop like a really strong sense of time, the sense of time that makes everyone want to play with you? Yeah, that's something that's like, yeah. I'm kind of, like I said, always looking for different ideas and thoughts on this. So yeah, I'm curious from your point of view, is there anything that someone shared with you, or you consciously worked on, that was a bit of a like, okay, I think this is kind of a good approach to go with in terms of time across all styles?
Yeah, certainly. There were things it's funny because I think time is the ongoing elephant in the room,
Mm.
because um it's possible to play sort of perfect time, but it doesn't necessarily work, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like uh I did a big band recording a while back, and we played everything to a click. And whilst it was really good, um in terms of being able to, say, splice two takes together.
Mm.
Um, I do listen. I have heard that music since and thought, yeah, it sort of suffers a little bit from being a bit too on, a bit too,
Mm.
if there's a big sort of phrase, and you want it to allow it to breathe. So I think,
Mm.
um, yeah, that was an interesting exercise.
Mm.
And sometimes you need to do that for efficiency in the studio, like,
Mm.
and the like just uh yeah what's convenience, and like,
Mm-hmm.
it makes a lot
Mm.
of sense. But yeah, like, there's different ways to approach playing with a metronome, like with a click track when recording too. And
Mm.
I need to perhaps sometimes be a little less anal about that, and I'm still
Mm.
got um 1 foot stuck in 1985, where I remember Stanton Moore saying, music was R&B, and it was like, groove music came along, and then he said, and then a terrible thing happened to music called the 1980s. um,
Great.
um but
Yeah.
yeah, as far as time, like, I think, obviously metronomic time, like perfect rhythmic, like perfect pulse, is the ideal thing to strive for.
Mm.
Um, but if you're doing it at the expense of the groove, like the groove, I see time as a component of groove, not the other way around.
Mm.
So, and the reason I say that, um, uh, I got this rave about how, um, like, for a group, for an ensemble to work, they have to be feeling the quarter notes um, lined up and right on.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but on top of that, if the ensemble can feel the subdivisions together, then
Mm.
that's another step in the groove. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's a higher step in the groove. And the good examples of that is say the Oscar Peterson trio. You know,
Mm.
like the Oscar Peterson trio not only feels the pulse, all the quarter notes, but the way the nuance, you know where they lay the triplet, they feel
Mm.
that together too.
Mm.
In the sort of backbeat genre, say a band like Little Feat,
Mm.
always comes to mind because they play and their subdivisions are they feel those as a unit. Um,
Mm.
so I have this rave about how you want to have at the very least good steady quarter notes, and then on top of that, um, accurate subdivisions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and in order for and that's within the ensemble, but within the beat itself. So
Mm.
whatever you're playing, everything has to line up on the quarter notes, and
Mm-hmm.
the beats in between have to line up where on whatever grid they happen to be, whether it's triplets um or straight eights or straight 16s,
Mm.
or a sort of swampy, in between variation as well. But
Mm.
as long as it's consistent, then that's going to groove. And then the counter argument to that, and I mean this in the absolute, um, you know, way, how do you explain? Burner to me, if I was to put that up on a grid, the the
Mm.
the the internal subdivisions change from time to time,
Mm.
and yet it's as groovy as all get out. So there's some other magic thing going on, like there's a um uh, a soul factor, or like there's a sort of or a historical factor, or whatever it is. John Robinson talks about manipulating the beat by laying back on the snare slightly, like the bass drum, and say on the 1 and 3 is right on, but the
Mm.
the snare drum is slightly behind, and then he weaves the hi-hat in to make it sound like smooth eights between those things.
Mm.
Um, and whether that's a conscious, I mean that's I guess that's the excuse me, that's the backwards engineering of what he's doing. But whether he's come into it consciously like that, or just gone, this is where it feels good, and
Mm.
and then I like analyzed it and gone, well, that's what's happening. um you know but like all of this stuff is thinking about time.
Mm.
And I mean, uh as long as you're thinking about it and working on something, that's a good thing. I mean, you asked specifically about things I practice. And funnily enough, I've been cleaning up here. It doesn't look like it, but I've been cleaning up around here.
Oh, looks great. Yeah.
Actually, it's not too bad, but there's all the shit is just outside of
Yeah,
shop.
that's not shot.
Yeah.
Good.
Um. Uh. I came across my old R8 drum machine.
Mm.
Um. Which was I had that from very young, and I love that thing. I used to practice with it all the time, and
Mm.
um, uh, I do things like on that. So if you're asking about specific exercise, I do things like have it play 2 bars of time and then 2 bars of silence,
Mm-hmm.
and then 4 bars of time and 4 bars of silence, and then eight
Mm-hmm.
bars of time and 8 bars of silence. And
Mm-hmm.
you could program things like that on that, and it was really good. And so that forces you to you know develop an internal pulse and clock. So I'd play time while the machine was playing time, and then
Mm-hmm.
solo for the 2 or 4 or 8 bars of silence,
Yeah, yeah.
um, and try to come back on one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very that's very telling.
Mm.
Um, Other things like just programming um, a click track that gets sparser.
Mm-hmm.
It stays in time, but so you might start with your quarter notes, and then go to half notes, and then go to whole notes, and then go to one beat every two bars and stuff like that.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
that those sorts of things. Oh, sorry, there's a dog. I got the door open here with the dog.
That's all good. No
Um,
stress.
uh, those sorts of things are really good for, just for internalizing pulse and
Mm.
feeling it without having to uh, rely on where the metronome is at.
Yeah, sure.
Uh, Other things like putting the metronome on putting the click on two and four, or putting it
Hmm.
on the say the ends, or
Mm.
even the second or fourth 16th, or the third or second triplet. Those sorts of
Hmm.
things
Hmm.
are really good. Um, and they make you solidly internalize where the downbeat is.
Mm.
Um, Funnily enough, with that metronome, sorry, with that R8 drum machine, um, it hasn't worked like it stopped working in the 90s
Okay.
sometime.
Yeah.
And it's been sitting here, and I've always thought it was the power supply.
Mm.
Right. And I thought, having done this cleanup, I'm looking for it, and I found, and I thought, I'll just have a little muck around with it, and I'm plugging it in, and nothing's happening, and I see on the back there's a brightness control on the LCD, right? And I give it a tweak, and what shit comes up. It's,
Oh man,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
so funny.
yeah. How about that?
Great. It's worked
Mm.
the whole time.
But these days I sort of do my click programming and stuff on Sibelius, so
Yeah. Hmm.
very straightforward. Yeah.
And did you record yourself like to listen back on like an analytical level?
Yeah.
Again, perhaps not anymore, but did you used to do that at all in
Oh,
your
sure. Yeah,
development?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. And you'd find your tendencies,
Mm.
you know, uh, one of the things as regarding time, like, I've been through all manner of stages, and I remember you and I spoke about time very early
Mm.
on when we met.
Mm.
You came to a hotel room somewhere, and
Mm-hmm.
we discussed. Do you remember this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and uh, like, see, one of the questions is, like, how do you make things feel exciting but not excited?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do like, because going from my rock and pop background, moving into the jazz world, like in the late 90s, or I beg your pardon, late 80s, I did the jazz course, and as I say, like, that was a music that wasn't familiar to me, in terms of, I hadn't grown up listening to it all the time. I'd heard
Mm.
jazz, but my experience of jazz was really, um, big, like a couple of big band things of Buddy Rich, like,
Mm-hmm.
from the point of my playing drums. But you, you know, like, jazz, as I say, is, generally speaking,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
kind of felt more on top,
Mm.
and how do you do that without, one, speeding up,
Mm.
or making it sound frantic? And they're the big questions. They're the things you need
Mm.
need to address. I had a beautiful analogy demonstrated to me, by a great bass player called Ed Gaston. Ed was an American cat who lived out here.
Mm.
Uh, he's not with us anymore, but he was an older guy when I knew him. Um, but we were driving somewhere, and we were talking about, Ed was renowned for being very on top, being very
Mm-hmm.
sort of pushy, but
Mm-hmm.
um, and I'd say that in the best way.
Mm.
It's because they're sort of, there's also, at various times, kind of fashionable traits, if you like. I think, like, oh, that's probably not the right word, but uh, fashionable concepts about, how, playing back on it that's cool.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's where the cool people play,
Okay.
um you know uh,
Yeah.
playing on top is immature. It's
Mm-hmm.
childish or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you know I've sort of come to realize there are times when everything's required,
Mm.
um but sorry, getting back to Ed's analogy, Ed said it's like, we're driving somewhere in the car, and he said, if I put, so he put his finger on the dash,
Mm.
and he said I can just rest my finger on the dashboard, and in terms of, you know say there's the dashboard, he said I can rest my finger on the dashboard, and that's where my finger meets the dash is where the time is. He said,
Mm.
but I can also push hard on my finger on the dashboard,
Mm.
but the dashboard doesn't get any lower,
Mm.
um, you know,
Mm.
but I'm pushing into it without
Mm-hmm.
pushing it forward. And
Sure.
that's the feeling you want to get. No, I always thought that was a great analogy. That
Wow.
was,
Yeah.
that was
That's
a,
quite deep.
yeah, it's pretty profound. Yeah, yeah,
That's cool. Yeah. I
yeah,
love it.
yeah. Just
Oh,
that,
cool.
to get that sort of, sense
Yeah, yeah.
of drive, but not speeding up. It doesn't like,
Yeah.
because once the dashboard starts to fall, is you're speeding up. The
Yeah,
tempo is moving.
definitely. Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
Wow, that's great. Um, I mean, yeah, like I said, there's any musician who I have the chance to play with, who's played with you, have all said the same thing about your playing in terms of like just that. You have an authoritativeness about your playing, but not in a like dictatorish, not in a dictating way. Like it's like controlling, but not but just very like comfortable for the band to play with. So
well,
yeah,
that's
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 something that I
nice to
yeah,
hear.
just
I
want
mean,
to yeah.
I'm sort of, there are different approaches to that. And
Mm,
I know, um, and I sort of think, like, I mean, again, I'm naming people, so I hope it doesn't come back to bite me. But
it's okay.
say someone like John Robinson,
Mm,
plays the drums in a very authoritative way,
mm,
um, and to me, his, uh, like, it sounds fantastic. He always sounds
mm,
fantastic, but to me, it's he comes at it from, if I'm in the band, if John Robinson's in the band,
mm,
if I'm in the band, I'm the band leader, so
mm,
where I put
sure.
it is where it is. And if you're not with me, you're
Mm,
wrong.
mm-hmm,
And he gets to play with with great players who do, who
mm,
play with him.
mm-hmm,
So it always sounds great.
mm.
I might be wrong. I might be wrong about that. That's the impression I get.
Yeah, sure.
Whereas someone like Steve Gadd,
Mm,
who is also, uh, obviously, obviously has an incredible groove, but,
mm,
is also very strong.
mm,
I mean, he was asked in an interview. There's this great interview on YouTube with, some guys who have a drum school in Italy, and,
mm,
I think we might have talked about this.
mm,
Um, and they say to him, "What's a groove?" And he says, "A groove is an agreement."
mm.
Um,
Yeah, I love it.
and yeah, and so I think he's coming at it, uh, where it's sort of, it is, there is give and take,
Mm,
and it, like, it's playing time, and, but saying, here's where I like it.
mm,
Where do you like it? Let's meet. Let's meet,
mm.
and like, because fighting never, you know I'm a lover, not
No
a
one, no
fighter.
one wins.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about give and take, and
Mm,
finding a middle ground. And I think that comes across with Gad, and I think he does that, better than anybody, and
hmm.
that's why he's
He's the best. Yeah, of
yeah. I mean,
course.
it's like I've never heard him play gratuitously where it's about anything other than the whole, the sound, the
Mm,
whole sound, that, the sounding of how everybody sounds.
yeah.
And it's very, engaging, and and it makes for some beautiful music, and clearly,
Oh yeah.
you know, what a body of work,
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
uh,
Absolute blueprint for so much.
yeah, totally,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
I thought of something during that, but no, I've forgotten. It's gone. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Oh man, there's a lot in there already. So yeah, yeah. Thanks for sharing all of that. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of I've researched a lot. I've chatted to a lot of people about the whole concept of time and groove and feel, and yeah, it's kind of that thing. Like I think you never like people like Gadd and Robinson. Obviously, like they get to a level, and it's like yeah, that's what it should be. But it's kind of an ongoing life journey as well, I suppose.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
terms
totally,
of
totally.
development and
Yeah, actually,
solidifying things.
I remember what I was going to say, and and you've probably I've probably probably done this rave to you before. The great saxophone player, he's from New Zealand but lives here, Craig Walters.
Mm,
Um, Really great tenor player, and he many years ago, Louis Bellson came out and played with the big band, with the big one of the big bands which I played with. Um,
mm.
so I always say that Louis Depp for me when he came out. Um, uh,
Great. Yeah,
um, but
love it.
Craig said, oh, not knowing a lot about Louis, he said I expected him to be this old guy with lots of chops.
Mm,
And he said, but what blew him away was when he played with Louis, was he said he just dug this trench time wise that the band
mm,
just fell into, that they fell into and wanted to play. And he said, and Craig went on to say, and I think that's the thing that all the great drummers have. So
mm,
you know, whether it's Steve Gadd or Tony Williams or Elvin
mm,
or Louis Bellson or Buddy Rich or Dave
mm,
Weckl,
mm,
um, you know, or on the other extreme like Ricky Fattar or
mm,
um, you know Russ Kunkel,
mm-hmm,
um, Stan Lynch, like all
mm,
these cats
mm,
have an inviting groove. They have a groove that
mm,
like a time feel that makes you want to go, yeah, I'm
mm.
going with that, because
Yeah,
that's where it's at,
sure.
which it has to be authoritative to some point, but it's
Yes,
also
yeah.
it's also got to be inviting as well. Um,
Yeah.
and um, yeah, I think that's kind of key, and I've left a lot of people out, but um, who do that, obviously.
Mm,
I mean,
mm.
I love um, um, uh, you know, that's terrible. In the I love Don Henley's drumming.
Ah,
Like
yeah, sure,
like
sure.
like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's such songwriters drumming.
Mm,
Uh, but yeah, the way he plays time and the way he you know solves musical problems,
yeah.
and by that I mean, bridges the section from the verse to the bridge, or going into like the way he moves from parts of the song to another. It's just
Mm,
it's glorious.
yeah.
But very, very simple and clear, like the clarity of
Mm,
it. I love
mm,
Mickey
mm,
Curry. Did I mention Mickey Curry before? Like
mm.
Mickey was a great job. Um, uh, I'll tell you who I dig is Bill Gibson from um, Huey Lewis and the News. Like
Oh, great. Yeah.
what a strong time feel that cat's got, man. Like
Yeah.
real strong and real. I always loved him, but I just was reminded recently. I heard he was on John DeChristopher's podcast.
Yeah, cool.
And it's fantastic. Um, but have you ever heard Ricky Fattar like live in the room? Hearing Ricky Fattar, like that's sort of
Yeah, right.
profound. Like if you ever get a chance to hear Bonnie Raitt, like
Mm,
don't miss it, man.
yeah.
It's. I mean, and he doesn't play anything 98% of drummers can't play like them,
Yeah, sure.
I mean, mechanically speaking,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
how he plays it, man,
Mm,
it really is. There's something happens in the air. I had
yeah.
a great story about hearing Jim Keltner. Have I told you my Jim Keltner rave?
No. No.
Oh, can I tell you this?
No, please
Yeah,
go.
I happened to. I was in LA one time, and they happened to be doing a tribute to Carlos Vega night, and
Mm,
um, there was a whole stack of drummers on, great heavy cats. Uh, Tom Brecklin, Abe Laboriel
mm,
Jr.
mm,
Oh, it's terrible. Like Greg Bissonette played
mm,
all like a all-star LA kind of a
mm,
festival thing, and the band was a band of heavyweights of people who played with Rufus and
mm,
all these sort of LA studio type people. Um, and then at one point, sort of later in the night, David Garfield was the musical director, and he said, "Oh, we're going to get up. Now we've got a special treat for you. We're going to get Jim Keltner, the
mm,
legendary Jim Keltner up, because I think it was pretty rare for Jim to play live,
mm,
like in that kind of small, like that kind of thing."
mm.
Um, and he said, and we're going to play Steely Dan's Josie, on which Jim played the original,
Wow. Yeah.
and you could see even the band as sort of old school stalwart heavyweights as they were all thrilled to be playing Josie with
Yeah,
Jim
great.
Keltner. It was this great thing. So anyway, they start the tune, and Keltner proceeds to play it as if he's never heard it before, right? And it's completely different from the record, and you can
Oh,
see them sort of scratching their heads a bit, going, whoa, what's going on here? But
wow.
yeah, it was. But what happened was just amazing, because once everybody went, okay, I guess that's where we're going. It went this place, and again, it got into this profound, sort of magical, floating beauty.
Mm,
Like it had this incredible dreamlike quality that was,
wow.
you can't write, I could write the notes out, but you can't
Yeah, yeah,
write what that was, and it was amazing. It was an amazing thing. And I think everyone sort of felt it, but you could,
yeah,
like, yeah, you could see it, like the band sort of scratching their heads, going, hang on, that's not how it goes.
yeah.
Um,
Oh my
at
gosh.
first, yeah, it was this really amazing thing, and I know, uh, speaking to Brian Cadd, who,
Mm,
had recorded with Keltner, and he said,
mm,
"Oh, yeah," he said, the tempo is wherever Keltner says it's going to be. It's not,
mm,
he doesn't, he's not going to play what to a clip that that
mm,
he's going to put it where he puts it,
sure.
and he sport like Cad speaks, you know um magically about what Keltner brings. It's a sort of magical quality that is really
Mm,
undefinable,
mm-hmm.
and I think that that's pretty real,
I mean, that's something, yeah, that you work for your life to get to that level, to be able to be someone who says, who people say, there's something about your playing we can't define that's, incredible, because there's, countless musicians who, yeah, are phenomenal at what they do, and it can be analyzed and you can figure out why. But then there's those handful. It's just like you hear them and it's indescribable. And yeah, he's certainly one of those
yeah
guys for
yeah
sure.
well,
Yeah,
that's right, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a sort of look, and I know, I'm sure sometimes it doesn't work as well, like
sure, yeah.
it's I had a story. I got to play with the guys from Go West, the
Mm.
English guys from the 80s, and they told a story about getting Keltner on a session, and him coming up with all this stuff, and they were scratching their heads, they said, as he walked out the door, he said, he's holding the door. He said, "Well, good luck putting that together," and he slammed the door and walked out. You know, um,
Oh my gosh,
but
I love it.
so like, but yeah, I think we've become, certainly in the recording process, and I'm sort of changing the subject here a lot, but
Mm,
I think we've become um, very controlling. Whereas I think a
mm,
lot of the records I grew up listening to and loving were much more spontaneous affairs than and
mm,
there was more acceptance of um uh creative ideas that may not fall within the mainstream,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting one. I mean, it goes beyond like drums and musicians. It's really, artists in general, about having that fine line of having a unique voice. But I guess if you want to, work as a quote unquote session hired side man kind of thing, like having that balance of both, like of course you want to be unique, you want to sound like you, but not maybe so far that it just doesn't, work in, an environment where you're just kind of hired to do a job, like
Yeah.
fit a role kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, I remember hearing a great podcast interview with Gary Novak,
Mm.
and he talked about, there's him and Abe Laboriel Jr. and a bunch, like a handful of cats doing a lot of the kind of LA pop music. And he says, he goes, we all play pretty good with a click, He said, and he said sometimes I'll be in the shopping center or whatever, and I'll hear one of the tracks come on. He said, and to be honest, he said, I can't tell whether it's me or Abe or who it is. He said
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. He said,
Mm.
but the only guys who uh y- you know who get to call um how what it is they play, Steve Jordan and Steve Gadd. He said that, they're the guys. And then he tells this great story about a friend of his was an engineer on a session, and Steve Jordan was playing the drums. And the producer says to Steve Jordan, they're playing the track, and he says, "Oh, can you go to the ride cymbal in the bridge?" And he goes, "No, no."
Great. Okay. That's good chat.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Oh wow. Yeah, man. Well, that's it. That's confidence and
yeah,
experience, I suppose.
yeah, man.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. I want to kind of shift a little bit and ask you a bit about like just some career things in general, particularly like how you approach. Like I've seen you've been doing a few theater shows for the last few years. You just finished up Jesus Christ Superstar. You're doing Hamilton for a little bit, and then prior to that, you were doing Australian Idol, like things that like are you're kind of booking yourself away for an extended period of time. But I know you're someone who's probably getting calls all the time for various other gigs, one-offs, and little tours and sessions and things like that. And I think that as a freelance musician and people who want to be versatile, it's kind of a balance that, well, a problem that a lot of people come up to at some point of like how far in advance you say yes to a gig and
Hmm.
what you say yes for and what's kind of the formula. Especially if you're doing like a season of a show that's going to lock you away
Mm.
and potentially like restrict you from other opportunities. So, yeah, what's your approach to that?
Um, oh, look, it's you got to pick your battles, and
Mm,
every situation is different. Like there's no sort of hard and fast rule.
mm,
I think as far as Hamilton's concerned, I was very lucky, because that happened during COVID.
mm,
And look, to be honest, like I hadn't, I'd never done a musical theatre show,
mm.
other than say, well, I did Tom Burlinson's Frank Sinatra show, but that was felt a bit different because it was more like a concert with a long narrative, but
Okay.
it was like a concert with a big band on stage. It wasn't like a theatre show with
Mm,
acting and whatever. But
mm,
so it was sort of like a concert him raving in between. But it
mm,
was a big band. It was a big band gig. But that was sort of as close as I'd got to being the guy on a theatre show. I'd done I'd depped on things from time to time and gone and filled
mm,
in on things, but I'd never been the main guy.
mm.
Um, and the reason I was attracted to Hamilton was because my kids were my kids were into it.
Great.
Because like they were into it long before I knew anything about it. And then it was coming
Mm,
to Australia, and then the opportunity came up, and I went for it. But and that was as I say during COVID, and for whatever reason that managed to hold up for most of the, we did get locked down, I think, for a couple of months in the middle of it, but that did a lot better than a lot of other things in terms of staying afloat. Um, and I was umming and ahhing about doing it, but I would say 90% of the things that I had that conflicted with it fell over, so I just was lucky to back the right horse with that one.
Great.
Um, uh, and Superstar that's the other one I've just done. That look, that was something I really loved that record. And I had played a version of that in the 80s, like a sort of a small, suburban version, wasn't the main thing. Like, and when I say played it, like it went for about 2 weeks, so wasn't like a big run. But and I'd fallen in love with the original record, and this is pre the Farnham Hirschfelder sort of
Yeah, right.
and this latest run, and I don't think it's coming to Adelaide, right?
I don't think so. No, not yet. Anyway.
But the latest run is the 50th anniversary of the record, albeit about 54 years since it came out, but or 50 more than that. Anyway, but that it was the Ian Gillan record. That's the one I really dug, and so this one was playing it sort of kind of true to that original record, arrangement wise and approach wise. So that was really cool. And I really did love that music and was keen to do it. I did, however, in anticipation of taking the gig, because it was only a 3-month run, so wasn't going to take me out of the action for too long. However, it did fall over a period where I had a couple of regular gigs that I really like to do, like annual gigs. Like I do the carols in the Domain here in Sydney every year, and that's that's sort of a week's worth of work, and I also do the Australia Day gig at the Opera House. I don't know if that comes to Adelaide, but it's that's a really great gig, so they're things that I wanted to retain. So before taking on Superstar, I made sure I was able to take time off for those things and a bunch of other things that were already in place, and they were really cool about it. They were very
great,
obliging, and it was it worked out for me. Like, it worked out great for me, actually. So
that's great.
So I had my cake and ate it.
That's beautiful. That's the perfect combo. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But it doesn't always work like that. And and in fact, I just there's a run later on this year with Lisa Simone, I mentioned before. Nina Simone's daughter is coming out again, and she's got she has a run in the book, and then that's in July, and then following that in August, Tim Finn's doing a bunch of gigs.
Great.
And it was all great and locked in and solid, and then they added a show to Tim's gig prior to the dates they already had. It falls on one of those Lisa Simone gigs. So at this point, I haven't worked out how I'm going to deal with that. But
sure.
it's one of those things, man. It's happened to me before. Back in the 90s, I had this fantastic year lined up where what was it? I can't remember what it was. It was a tour with Dragon, and then and that finished in July, whatever it was. And in July, I had a run with a Malaysian singer, lady called Sheila Majid, where we go to Malaysia for a week and rehearse there, and then go to London, and she had some shows in London. And then I can't remember what the other thing was, a month in in August, and it was all like this beautiful 3-month run that all just lined up. And then the middle gig, the Sheila Majid gig, got extended both ends
Oh no.
and messed up both of the other things,
Oh no.
you know.
Yeah, right.
So
Uh,
you
uh,
know, you
yeah,
got to, as I say,
you
pick your
can't win.
battles
Yeah.
look, hopefully people are understanding. I mean, the more people have been around,
Mm,
the more they're likely to understand, when things
mm,
when like, and I mean it's difficult, like, and if this does happen, is people will call and go, um, are you available on the 26th of March 2027?
yeah.
Maybe not 20,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
say,
Yeah,
2026.
next
And you
year,
go,
yeah.
well, yeah, I am right now, but
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
if a tour comes in that's gonna cover it, I don't think I can hold out
Yeah.
for one gig.
Mm,
So, but look, I think you got to be as upfront with people as you can,
mm,
and uh, and if in fact it does come to a point, like a situation where you have to, or you'd like to blow something out, you put it to them and say, look, can I'll get you somebody to cover it, and I'll make sure they're up to
mm,
speed, or like,
mm, mm, mm,
you know,
mm.
um,
Yeah, make
yeah,
it easy. Yeah.
yeah, you want to make it easy and do the right
Yeah.
thing, but but hopefully, I mean, like, it's real, man. Like, we are in a cost of living crisis. I got three kids, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
life's not cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make decisions that you can't be making. Um, like, certainly when I first started, I had a sort of uh, a personal rule that I would honor the first thing that came in.
Mm,
But
mm,
over time, it just became impractical.
mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying you leave people high and dry, but you've got to be realistic, and
Mm-hmm.
they have to too. Um,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
I had a funny story. Oh, you got time for a story, or
Of course, man,
yeah.
all the time. Yeah.
Um, in the early, like, I live in Sydney. And in 1993, I got um given I got the gig to do the Steve Izard show, which was in
Mm,
Melbourne. And um so it meant moving down to Melbourne and and
mm-hmm.
and and whatever. Um but there wasn't a lot of notice before getting the gig and it happening, and I did have a bunch of commitments in Sydney
Mm,
on the weekends. So the Vizard
mm,
show was Monday to Friday. Um so I just thought, well, I'm making good money. I'm going to honor whatever. There were a couple of things, obviously weekday things I couldn't do,
mm,
but I'm going to honor my weekend commitments and pay for the flights and come back and do the
mm-hmm.
right thing. Wherever I possibly can physically be there, I
Mm-hmm.
will. And um, the thing about the other thing about the Vizard show was they pre-recorded the Tuesday and Thursday shows in the afternoon.
Mm,
So, around about lunchtime. Um, so, and there was a situation, I'd been booked for a Tuesday night gig in Sydney.
okay.
Um, and so I'd have to, do the Monday night show in Melbourne, do the Tuesday afternoon show, fly to
Mm,
Sydney, honor my
mm,
gig, and
mm-hmm.
come back. And I
Mm-hmm.
was prepared to do it. But this was a couple of months, or no, so we're probably a month into doing the
Mm-hmm.
Vizard show. Anyway, um, uh, I've never told her this, that the singer, or maybe I won't say her name, but she left a message on my show, on my phone, and reasonably assuming that because she'd heard I was doing the Steve Izard show Monday to
Mm,
Friday, that I wouldn't be available for this gig on this Tuesday night that she'd booked me for, and
mm,
left this abusive message saying, Well, I never thought you would do this. I'm so
Oh,
disappointed. I'm really
wow.
upset. Like, right, she, like cane me. Like,
Oh my gosh.
and all along, I hadn't actually booked the flight yet, but I was, my intention was to fly back and do the gig, and
Yeah.
she just like gave it to me,
Let it
you
go.
know,
Oh
um,
wow.
and you know, I like, how could you do this? It's so unprofessional, like you haven't even let me know that you can't do it, Um,
Wow. Yeah. All that.
and you know, and by the end of the phone call, like it was a message. By the end of the message, I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it
Oh,
now, So,
that's great.
so
Yeah. Right.
you know, and I
Yeah.
never I never
Sure.
told her. I never told her that, actually I was able to do your gig and
You're
prepared to
gonna
do
do
it.
it.
And anyway,
Oh man.
never.
That's a lesson.
Yeah.
100% a lesson. Wow. Man, great. I love that. Yeah, well, I guess that's it. You just, yeah, like you say, there's no formula for that kind of stuff, and
It's tricky.
yeah, you just take it one thing at a time. Yeah.
James Morrison tells a story about being booked to do like a gig in Papua New Guinea,
Mm,
which is certainly then and probably still now is pretty, pretty Wild West. Like, it's pretty,
mm,
you know.
mm-hmm.
And the guy had booked him, and he was he was contracted to it, and all of that, and he gets a call on the same date from Quincy Jones in person to come and do a show in Europe with, Phil Collins and um, Shaka Khan and like all the cool people, right?
Wow.
And he's got to do this bloody gig in Papua New Guinea to a bunch of, um,
Oh
pissed
wow.
expats, and
Yeah.
so so he that they contact the promoter or the guy running the gig, and they say, look, can we change the date? And the guy
Mm,
goes, no, sorry, no. And it's like, oh, okay. And then they come back and they say, can we change the date and do like and give you another show, like, and give you
mm.
two shows for the price. And he says, no, no, I can't, no, can't, And it's
Oh
like,
my gosh.
and then can we change the date, give you two shows and do it for nothing, like. And the guy
Yeah.
goes, "No, look, I'm really sorry." He said, "Oh, look, I'm not being difficult here, but," he said, "out here, everything works in the bush telegraph. This is sort of pre-mobile phones, and
Yeah.
communication works like by word of mouth that filters through." And he
Yeah.
said, um, and he said, if you don't show up on that night and people come to town and you're not here," he said, "someone's going to get shot, like literally
Oh
shot and
my
killed,
gosh.
like someone's going to die."
Wow.
So he said, I'm not trying to be difficult, and I'd love to
Yeah.
accommodate you. However, I
Oh
can't
wow.
change the date." And James says, so, he copped it. Like, that was it. He,
Oh.
had to cop it sweet, and had to do the
Just call
gig.
Quincy back and say no.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's
mate.
right.
I'm booked.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Oh
Q,
my
mate, I got a
gosh.
got a better offer. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
better off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Oh
but
man.
and
Yeah.
and James's point is, look, there's nothing wrong with asking the question. Um,
Mm.
you know, but his thing is, if people insist, then they insist, I mean,
Well, that's what it is. Yeah.
I had I was doing at the end of one of the live Australian Idol tours. It was the
Mm.
last weekend of that, and the following week I was coming back. I was back in Sydney on Monday, and the following weekend I was, I had like a crappy little RSL gig, in some
Yep.
joint, so going from these like
Hmm.
big sort of arena type things to,
Yeah.
which is happens all the time. Like, there's no
Yeah. Yeah.
making it in Australia, mate. You sort of, I tell the story, like, one day you can be playing on the concert hall of the Opera House, and the next day you're on the back of a truck in the
Yeah. Yeah.
country somewhere in the back of a field.
Yeah.
Um,
That's what it is.
yeah. So anyway, so yeah, like, we're about to finish this tour, and the next Saturday I'm at this RSL, doing a shitty little gig, and
Mm.
um, and James Morrison calls me, and he says, "Oh, mate, are you working next Saturday night?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "Well," he said, "you might want to see if you can get out of it. He said,
Mm.
I'm here with Lalo Schifrin, the composer, the guy who wrote Mission Impossible, and
Yeah, yeah,
we're
yeah.
doing Jazz Meets the Symphony, and Grady Tate is playing the drums. They're
Right.
in Adelaide actually.
Yeah, right.
He said, but next week we're in Sydney, and Grady's sick. So do you think? He said, do you think you can do it?
Oh man.
And I said, well, I'll make a call.
Mm.
And it turned out. Um, they were recording it as well. They were recording
Oh,
the Sydney show with the Sydney Symphony, and uh, so it was worth, let's just say, a great deal of money.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
but and I had to ring this guy and say, "Oh man, do you mind if I um get out of your gig next Saturday? I got this thing,
Mm.
um, and he was very gracious, but like if I had stuck to my original rule of you got to honor the first
That's
commitment,
it. Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
you got to be
Wow.
reasonable,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Wow.
that Lalo Schifrin gig led to a few years of touring, like doing things with Lalo and going to Europe, and
Yeah,
like every time he'd come to Australia, I'd play with him for the next several years, and I think he's pretty
yeah,
much retired now, but yeah, I got a couple of trips to Europe, to
man.
Montreux
That's amazing.
Austria.
Definitely worth it.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Mate, that was a phone call I don't regret.
Definitely worth the fuck.
As
Exactly.
hard as
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah, sure. Man, that's amazing. What a story. Um, man, this has been incredible. I'm conscious of the time and don't want to take up too much more, but I generally kind of wrap up chats I have with people, like asking them about their social media and where people can follow follow them and what they're up to and things like that. But you famously have like no social media presence at all, which is
No
so
social skills.
well, man. But I just think it's so amazing because there's like so much pressure I feel, and maybe you've heard it too, like to be a musician now successful, you got to have social media and you got to be posting things and content and blah blah blah. But you're someone who doesn't really have any of that at all. And you've been in the business for so long. I'm curious, like, yeah, what just do you have thoughts on that? And is there a reason you're not going down that path, or is it just a
Um,
time thing? Like, what's
ah,
it's a big question,
yeah,
I'm sure,
look,
but
yeah, this might come as a shock to some people, but I find I don't feel comfortable kind of, waving my own flag,
mm-hmm,
and I don't have anything against other people doing what they do, and
mm-hmm.
but I don't feel, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. And that's probably, I've had people tell me, well, get over that, don't be stupid, like get over it. And, you know,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I feel, a bit, uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
I suppose.
Sure.
And, I suppose there's times I've thought about doing things, and I watch YouTube videos a lot.
Mm.
I'm right
Mm-hmm.
into that, and and things lead to other things. There's
Mm-hmm.
some great cats out there, man, like
Mm.
doing great things
Mm.
education wise. Quincy Davis, have you come across
Mm-hmm.
him? He's
Mm-hmm.
fantastic.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them, man.
Mm.
But there's also a bunch of uh really dodgy ones, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Mm.
And I just it's the problem. One of the problems I see with it is that, you know, some guy playing who's never done a gig, who's got a few chops in his bedroom,
Mm.
um, plays and posts something and has just as much opportunity as Dave Weckl to
Mm.
get his word out, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, it didn't work like that, when I was coming up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You had to be great before, and there was
Mm.
certainly things wrong with the system before, but
Mm.
um, you know, I mean, I don't think people sort of realize just how great Dave Weckl is, you know, because there's so much other noise to distract you, you know.
Yeah,
Like, I
sure.
mean, there's so much, like, you know what I mean? Like Weckles,
Mm-hmm.
I know you know, like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Weckles got so much going on. And he's getting better and better and better, and
Mm-hmm.
he's so musical, and it's so deep, man,
Mm-hmm.
and yet, you know, like he'll come up as a suggested video just the same
Yeah.
as, you know, some guy in his
Some
bedroom,
dude. Yep.
you know.
Yep. Yep.
So
Sure.
I
Yeah.
struggle with that a bit,
Yep.
which is, you know, that's still not a reason to not do it. Uh, I also like to, I suppose, do things like really get stuck into things, and like if I'm going to do it, it would be a big time commitment, you know.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
I like, like, you know, I'm a bit of a, to my own detriment, like a bit of a perfectionist in terms of, you know, like I'd want the quality of videos to
Mm-hmm.
be good, and the lighting, and
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, I'd like
Mm-hmm.
it to all be this. So it's like, you know,
It's like, yep.
where do you start?
Yeah.
So like, um, I don't know. There's certainly things. There's issues I think need addressing, and they're not necessarily just drumming issues. I've got this
Mm.
pet peeve about the way people write drum charts, and
Mm.
I'd like to do a some kind of uh, you know, educational thing, not for drummers, but
Sure.
for arrangers to you
Rangers.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
copyists to go, look, this is, you know, um, sorry to, you know, I know you've been doing it this way for 100 years, but
Yeah.
if you want your charts to sound good, first go, here's
Yeah.
a couple of tips, you know,
Let's go with this.
you know,
Yeah. Sure.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like, you
Yeah.
know, there's lots of things like that, but yeah, like, you know, yeah, I don't know, man. And look, the market, it's very saturated. So I suppose I
Yeah.
feel like, what's the point? It's just another voice in amongst you know,
Yeah.
you know, and if everybody felt like that, it would, um, you know, it wouldn't be ideal either. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, go on.
I'm
So,
curious, like, what you're like, because I think, yeah, as I said, there's a lot of pressure, and I think it's a bit of a default thing now for people to say to younger musicians and people trying to get into the scene, like, how do I, you know, how do I get connected, and how do I get noticed by people, and how do I find my way, you know, in the scene, and be a successful musician. And the answer is generally like, oh, you should just, you know, put some stuff online, you know, have an Instagram and start
right.
posting videos of yourself playing, and, you know, or YouTube or what have you. So what is, yeah, what's your advice then to the younger
Oh,
players coming up to get, yeah, just to get noticed and get connected?
see,
Is it,
I
yeah.
suppose, you know, it sounds sort of holier than thou, but like, I I don't think I was concerned with that. I mean, you know, I got connected by um going through doing the jazz course at the conservatorium, and starting, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
studying with other like-minded players, um and you know, you get into a scene, and then you start working with those guys, and then someone else hears you, and they go, oh, you know, come and play with us, and then if you do a
Mm-hmm.
good job, you stay playing with them, and then someone hears that, and so on, and
Yeah.
that's, you know, that's how it used to work. Um,
Mm.
so there wasn't a sort of a preoccupation with how do I
Mm.
get myself out there. The preoccupation was, how do I play better? How do I, you know, I
Mm.
want to sound
Mm-hmm.
better, just because
Mm-hmm.
I want to sound better, you know, like get
Mm-hmm.
good at something before you sort of start promoting promoting
Sure.
yourself,
Yeah.
you know, like
Yeah.
you know, and, there's a great Pat Metheny. It's an article, but it's a speech that he gave as a commencement address. Um,
Mm.
have we talked about this? I know.
I think I've seen that, what you're talking about,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah.
So he does every year at Berkeley, in the States. They get some superstar to come and give a
Mm.
commencement address to the students,
Mm-mm.
and Pat Metheny's, it was online. I haven't checked lately, but it's
Mm.
probably still there. It's a beautiful speech that he gives, and he talks about how, you know, like, he's got Grammy. I mean, he said, like I've been very lucky. I've got Grammy awards. I've released my own music. I've got to play with my heroes. I've got to play with great players. Um,
Mm,
I'm doing this all the time, and he said, but he said all that is that's not the that's not the job. The job is the day-to-day getting better at what we do, at your craft, like
mm,
refining your craft and getting better, the
mm,
practicing,
mm, mm,
that's, it's the passage of time, doing the process of being a musician.
mhm,
That's where it's at, not the rewards or the perceived
mm,
rewards or,
mm,
and it's a great, I mean, it's much more eloquent than that, but
mm, mm.
excuse me.
No, I understand. Yeah.
Um, Sorry, but he says, and at one point he says, and here's the thing, he says, I believe that truly great art, great music will have a way of finding its way out there, you know.
Mm,
Um,
sure.
I suppose if you were to lock yourself in a bedroom and just do your thing, um, and not pursue any form of promotion, then
Mm,
how does it get out there?
yeah.
But yeah, I'd say, look, I don't know. I mean, I came up in a different time, and
Mm,
I sound like a real old bloke talking. I
not
look
at
I
all.
look like a real old bloke talking,
Not at
but
all.
but but um, but it's, like, I think there's some look. Yeah. Obviously, you have to promote yourself in some way. As far
Mm,
as that's concerned, I'm not the I'm not the right person
mm,
to ask. But what I would say is, get 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 good at something. Like get,
mm,
find what it is that floats your boat,
mhm,
um, musically. Whether that's,
mhm,
playing double bass drum,
mhm.
like at 300 beats a minute,
Yeah.
and like, or whether it's playing, the deepest, fattest, slowest, grooviest pocket, and that becomes your thing.
Mm, mm,
Like, it doesn't matter. Like, Terry Bozzio um has pursued that melodic drumming and the ostinato thing, with the
mhm,
massive drum kit, um,
mm,
to such a high level.
mm.
And I remember him saying at a drum clinic, he said, that he came to a clinic in Sydney, and he said, thanks so much for coming out. He said, I really appreciate it. It's really nice to see so many people here. He said, however, I will say, if you hadn't come out, he said, I'd still be doing this same thing, but just in my garage at home,
Yeah,
Um,
right.
and I
Great.
think, yeah, that's so cool, man, because it's
Yeah.
like that's the thing that's what he loves to do, and
Yeah.
you're not doing it for notoriety. You're doing it
Yeah.
because it's fun to do. It feels
Yeah.
good to do. That's
Yeah, sure.
I sound holier than thou, but it's like I think that
No,
man,
no, not at all. I think, like, like I said before, someone with your experience who's seen so much change, I'm sure, in the industry, trends come and go, and that kind of thing. Like, this what you're speaking to is extremely valuable, and I think, yeah. I
and
mean, I'm super grateful, like I said, that we're able to do this and share it with more people, because it's incredible stuff. Mm.
look, and the one constant I'll say, over all that change, is that a good groove is a good groove.
Yes,
So, like,
great.
man, like, it never gets old.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like a perfect place to wrap it up. So, yeah, man. Thank you,
Oh,
man. Gordon Rytmeister. Thank you, man. This has been so great,
what a
and
pleasure, man. Thanks.
yeah, I really hope to catch up in person again soon and hang.
I'd love to hear what you're doing.
Cool. Yeah, let's chat more.
Beautiful, man.
Cool. Thanks, mate.
All right.
Thank you.
Cheers. Take care. Thanks for having me.